In this video, we'll be going over some of the best patches throughout the history of WoW. Patches that include either fan favorite raids, well-received quality of life improvements, major lore reveals, or even revolutionary new systems which changed endgame content for the better. And first up at number 10, we have patch 1.11, Shadow of the Necropolis, a content patch for vanilla World of Warcraft which released June 19, 2006. This patch added the original 40-player raid Naxxramas featuring 15 bosses, tier 3 armor sets, and some of the most challenging content that vanilla WoW had to offer, also making several class adjustments as well as significant revamps to talents for both mage and shaman players. For example, all mage players could now learn evocation from a trainer at level 20, whilst shamans received an increase of the duration of multiple totems, such as their flame tongue and disease cleansing totem. The reason that patch 1.11 makes this list though, is due mainly to original Naxxramas. Not only was the encounter design cutting edge, pushing vanilla WoW to new heights with fights such as Hegan the Unclean, including their revolutionary dance mechanics, but it was genuinely considered the toughest content for its time as well, requiring 40 well-geared and highly skilled players to beat. Keeping in mind, this was back before widespread voice chat, readily available strategy guides, and general muscle memory built from years of playing WoW. The challenge was well worth it, however, with the raid offering meaningful rewards for successful players with some of the most powerful items, like the Guardian of Tearsful's legendary staff, Atiesh, Great Staff of the Guardians, wielded by lore legends like Adrian and her son, Medivh, and his joke of a son, Medan from the comics who no one cares about, as well as tier 3 armor sets. Naxxramas was so iconic that Blizzard ended up reusing it as a Wrath of the Lich King launch raid, albeit with a 25/10 player version. But many of WoW's modern raid mechanics are inspired by and can trace their roots back to this original 40-man instance. This list can not only be a bunch of nostalgia-bait entries though, there have been plenty of great patches over the years that have solidified WoW as one of the top MMOs of all time for over 20 years. And at number 9, we have patch 4.2, Rage of the Firelands, released as part of the Cataclysm expansion on June 28, 2011. This one added the Firelands raid, a 7-boss raid. The raid itself culminated in a battle against Ragnaros, but with a twist. 4.2 also added Firelands invasion daily quests, allowing players to build up a base, recruit allies, and unlock vendors and storylines over time. Using a newly introduced currency, Mark of the World Tree, players could purchase powerful gear, reputation commendations, and profession recipes. And as is usually the case with most patches, some minor class balance tweaks and PvP updates were included as well. The reason this one makes number 9 is, again, down to the quality of the raid design. The Firelands was artistically stunning with varied, interesting encounters and mechanics. Ragnaros was a particular standout, including a 4th secret phase in heroic mode, with a dramatic twist reveal during the final phase transition, where the Fire Lord emerged from the lava and showed us that he could walk around with legs, like a big boy, all while summoning meteors and unleashing devastating attacks. Defeating heroic Ragnaros was a genuine badge of honor, with his mount drop, Smoldering Egg of Milgazor, being quite the prestigious status symbol. But the raid wasn't the only great thing about patch 4.2. Players were also fond of the outdoor content, the Molten Front. Daily progression felt rewarding and worthwhile, and after the underwhelming response towards patch 4.1, this follow-up restored players' faith and was a much-needed win for the expansion as a whole. And at number 8, we have Rise of Azshara, patch 8.2, the second patch of the Battle for Azeroth expansion, releasing June 25, 2019, adding 2 zones, Nazjatar, the underwater capital city of the Naga, ruled by Queen Azshara, and Mechagon Island, a sprawling scrap heap containing a vault, hiding a lost technological city and leader of the Mechagnomes, Mad King Mechagon. On top of that, the patch added both the Eternal Palace raid and the Operation Mechagon Mega Dungeon, also providing a major overhaul to BFA character progression in the form of the Essence system, allowing players to infuse active and passive powers into their Heart of Azeroth based on their class. For example, Purification Protocol for DPS classes added a major power which called down a purifying beam on a target area, dealing fire damage, or a minor power which allowed a player's damaging spells and abilities to release a blast of Azerite, doing fire damage to enemies within 8 yards. And finally, we got mount equipment, which allowed players to customize their mounts with abilities, such as water walking or a parachute, which could catch your fall if you fell from a high spot. In addition, this patch also allowed flying in Kul Tiras and Zandalari zones as well, making leveling alts and questing a lot smoother and easier as a result. The reason why 8.2 is on this list is down to the sheer density and variety of the content it added. Whilst Azshara offered a more traditional zone with questing and a story leading into a raid, Mechagon offered something more fresh, or at least at the time, with its sandbox exploration, rares, and mount drops like Rustfeather and the Junkheap Drifter, an upgradable trinket in the pocket-sized computation device, and an overall less guided, less handholdy experience. Not only that, but the Essence system actually managed to fix many of the complaints people had with the Azerite gear system in Battle for Azeroth, which was the main issue that the player base had with the expansion. Players were already a bit jaded with borrow-powered systems by this point anyway, especially since Azerite gear followed a much stronger system of artifact weapons during Legion. There were, however, quite a lot of essences to choose from right from the get-go in 8.2, which created an opportunity for much more customization and build diversity, in theory. But as is often the case, there's usually a meta build or two which the majority of players decide they must use in order to be competitive. But still, both the dungeon and raid designs were, once again, quite a standout. Operation Mechagon was very creative and mechanically rich, albeit including an extremely annoying stealth section, whilst the Eternal Palace was a solid raid, including memorable fights against Lady Ashvane and Queen Azshara herself, a major figure in Warcraft lore, who some speculate may be prominently featured yet again sooner or later within the World Soul saga. And next at number 7, we have patch 7.1 Return to Karazhan, Legion's first medium patch released December 9th, 2016, revamping the iconic Burning Crusade 10-player raid into a mythic-only dungeon, featuring secret rooms, puzzles, and callbacks to the original instance. 7.1 also added the Trial of Valor mini-raid, including only 3 bosses, Odin, Guarm, and Helia, but still managing to be surprisingly epic in scale regardless. And on top of that, the Siramar/Nightfallen storylines were concluded, leading towards the rebellion against Elisande and the Nighthold raid. Return to Karazhan is still considered one of the best dungeons ever made, due to combining raid-level complexity with the pacing of a dungeon, and setting a new standard for mythic content in the process. It was absolutely packed with nostalgia and interesting secrets, like an entire additional boss encounter against Nightbane, who in turn offered the chance at looting the smoldering Emberworm mount. Meanwhile, the narrative in Siramar was one of Legion's strongest storylines, which 7.1 only assisted in expanding further. Whilst the Trial of Valor raid provided a bit of a payoff to a long-standing tidbit in the lore, with Odin being sealed inside the Halls of Valor by Helia ever since Logan's betrayal of his fellow keepers. When we defeated Helia in Helheim at the end of the raid, the curse upon Odin was finally broken, granting the once prime designate his freedom, which is not actually necessarily a good thing because Odin is a complete and utter jerk, but hey-ho. And at number 6, we have patch 5.4, Siege of Orgrimmar, released at the end of the Mist of Pandaria expansion on September 10th, 2013. 5.4 added the massive 14-boss raid, Siege of Orgrimmar, taking players from a vault beneath the Veil of Eternal Blossoms, all the way to the heart of the Horde capital of Orgrimmar, ending with a fight against the war chief who did nothing wrong, Garrosh Hellscream. We also got the Timeless Isle, a free-form outdoor zone with rares, treasures, world bosses, and events. The flexible raid difficulty feature was also added, which provided groups of 10 to 25 players the opportunity to scale difficulty dynamically, laying the groundwork for future formats like normal and heroic that we have today. Solo proving grounds were added, which let players solo unique trials designed to improve and test their skills in either damage, tanking, or healing. And finally, major tuning across specs for PvP viability and raid performance were included as well. Now, Siege of Orgrimmar was one of the longest and most ambitious raids we've ever seen, tying together multiple storylines involving old gods, conflicting worldviews, regrets, mistakes, and generational feuds, whilst also taking players to multiple locations and continents. Meanwhile, the Flex raiding mode was a bit of a game changer, allowing friends and guilds of all sizes to raid together without strict size requirements. And on top of all of that, we also got an enjoyable endgame questing hub with a sandbox style which, very much like the future Mechagon, encouraged exploration and community engagement instead of just holding our hand throughout. All in all, 5.4 was a strong expansion finale, ending Mists of Pandaria with a bang. Sentiment towards the expansion wasn't quite as positive at launch, with a lot of people moaning about Kung Fu Pandas, but Mists of Pandaria has since become a very underrated part of WoW's history, with many players looking back on it fondly. And at number 5, we have patch 7.3, Shadows of Argus, the second content patch of the Legion expansion, released August 29th, 2017. Firstly, 7.3 added 3 new zones on the planet of Argus: Krokun, Antoran Wastes, and Makri, with each zone having its own story progression, world quests, rares, and secrets. Secondly, the patch added invasion points. Players could travel through both a major as well as minor portals to other worlds, fighting against Legion forces in short, repeatable, and pretty fun scenarios. Thirdly, we got the Antorus the Burning Throne raid. Fourthly, we got lore setup for both Lightforged Draenei and Void Elves. And finally, a fairly decent currency and catch-up system in Veiled Argonite and Primal Sargerite, making it easier for alt and returning players to gear up and jump into the latest content. The reason 7.3 makes this best patches list though is mostly thanks to the vast amount of lore payoff we received within it. For fans of the story, Legion was to WoW what Endgame was to MCU nerds, concluding many plot threads that have been running since the original RTS games, albeit with a few retcons along the way, like the changes made to the Draenei and the Eredor from the original Warcraft 3 instruction manual to the Burning Crusade expansion, which, funnily enough, Chris Metzen actually apologized for, stating he basically just forgot while also gently nudging people to just get over it. But back when Legion was current, Sargeras and the Burning Legion were considered the true big bad of the Warcraft universe canon and lore as far as we knew. The raid itself ended with us fighting a literal Titan world soul, Arcus the Unmaker. It didn't get much more dramatic than that, not to mention the fact that Antorus was also massive in terms of its scope. With world quests, invasion points, rares, and satisfying story chapters, Shadows of Argus kept players engaged for months, which is no small feat. And at number 4, we have patch 2.4, Fury of the Sunwell, a content patch released as part of the Burning Crusade expansion on March 25th, 2008, adding the 6-boss raid Sunwell Plateau, ending in a fight against the Deceiver Kil'jaeden, but also featuring a fight against Muru, who deserves a mention in this video for no reason other than that we just always mention him. We got the Magister's Terrace dungeon fighting Kel'Thas Sunstrider once again, because Tempest Keep was merely a setback. Both instances situated on the Isle of Quel'Danas, a new daily quest hub in the Burning Crusade that we will soon be returning to at midnight. But originally, this new hub allowed players to unlock vendors and quests while gaining reputation and gold. And finally, 2.4 allowed Badges of Justice, otherwise known as heroic tokens, to now drop from all raid bosses, having previously only dropped from Karazhan and Zul'Aman in patch 2.3. There are a number of reasons 2.4 makes this list. Firstly, Sunwell Plateau was hands down one of the hardest instances that players had to face in its time, with some guilds reporting over 500 wipes to the pre-nerfed version of Muru. Beating this raid was a true badge of honor for any guild that managed to succeed prior to the release of the next expansion, Wrath of the Lich King. The daily content added with the patch was also outstanding though, being one of the most engaging daily hubs ever created, giving players a reason to log in every day and feel like they were part of a larger server effort rather than just doing chores in order to keep up. But speaking of keeping up, the gear catch-up system actually worked as well. Badges bridged the gap between casual and hardcore players, which, in turn, kept more of the player base active and raid ready. And last but not least, the Blood Elf, Burning Legion, and Sunwell lore mixed with Kil'jaeden's cinematic entrance at the end of the raid all contributed towards some truly unforgettable moments for fans of the Warcraft story. Next, at number 3, we have The Secrets of Ulduar patch 3.1. This was the first major content patch released within the Wrath of the Lich King expansion on April 14th, 2009, adding the 14 boss raids set within the massive Titan facility of Ulduar, featuring a variety of encounters against corrupted Titan Watchers as well as the old god Yogg-Saron. But that's not all. 3.1 also introduced dual talent specialization, letting players swap between 2 talent builds, e.g. tanked healer or PvE/PvP, without visiting a trainer, whilst also introducing an early version of the Argent Tournament Grounds, which would go on to be expanded further in future patches. As per usual, significant class balance changes, new glyphs and UI improvements were included as well. Ulduar is yet another raid which is widely considered to be one of the best, with bosses like Mimiron and his infamous Firefighter hard mode, Freya and Yogg-Saron being particularly praised for their creativity. Hard mode and precursors to mythic difficulty had existed in the past in raids such as Ahn'Qiraj and Zul'Aman, but Ulduar took the concept and implemented it into 10 of the 14 encounters within the raid. Instead of simply toggling a difficulty setting, hard mode was activated by player actions, granted sometimes just by pushing a big red button. But overall, it was a much more organic and immersive system. The reason Algalon the Observer is an entirely optional boss in Ulduar is because he was originally hard mode only, despawning after a time limit of an hour from entering the instance, and only accessible after defeating several other bosses on hard mode first. But if you did manage to complete the necessary steps, you were rewarded with yet another iconic, visually stunning, and cinematic fight, literally saving the entire planet in the process. And all of that aside, the dual spec feature fundamentally changed the game right up until Legion finally allowed players to just switch between all specs. But from Wrath until Legion, dual spec made it much easier for players to fill multiple roles, adapt to different content, and was considered to be one of the greatest quality of life improvements to the game for a long time. And at number 2, we have patch 5.2, the Thunder King. Another Mista Pandaria patch released on March 5th, 2013. Adding yet another colossal raid, the 12-boss Throne of Thunder featuring one of the best end bosses in WoW history, Lei Shen, the Thunder King. We also got the Isle of Thunder Zone with daily quests, rare spawns, world bosses, and even PvP objectives. Not only is Throne of Thunder considered yet another example of peak WoW raiding, Lei Shen in particularly is remembered as a near perfect final boss, being challenging, cinematic, and mechanically rich all at once. The Isle of Thunder is still considered to be an absolute masterclass in zone design. Long-term players have very fond memories of moments such as swarming Nalak the Stormlord and Indasta the Devilsaur world boss while assisting either Jaina Proudmoore or Lorthamar Theron in spearheading their faction assault on the Isle. This patch gave players a reason to log in every day, whilst both mid-tier and hardcore guilds got something out of the raid as well. For many, Blizzard were firing on all cylinders when patch 5.2 released. But of course, being number 2 on this list, there is one other patch which should really be considered peak World of Warcraft. And that brings us to the number 1 on this list, where we have to give it to patch 3.3, Fall of the Lich King, released at the end of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion on December 8th, 2009. Just goes to show how fantastic Wrath of the Lich King really was, with the patch including the much celebrated 12-boss Icecrown Citadel raid, which ended the final battle against Arthas Menethil, aka the Lich King. The introduction of the Dungeon Finder tool, which revolutionized group content. 3 new dungeons, Forge of Souls, Pit of Sauron, and Halls of Reflection, each telling a story which led directly into the raid, and included very memorable moments, like hopelessly cheesing it from a very angry Arthas, as well as cross-realm grouping and improved raid lockouts. Firstly, this was a huge narrative climax. Arthas was the hero turned villain in Warcraft 3, and the antagonist of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. Defeating him was one of the most anticipated things in the entire franchise's history. And although we technically didn't do the deed, the cinematic ending with the ghost of King Taranis declaring there must always be a Lich King still remains one of the best that Blizzard has ever created. The music, the atmosphere, the pacing, variety, and quality of the raid itself, all contributing towards ICC being a major contender for the best WoW raid to a large chunk of long-term players. And that's before we've even considered the introduction of the Dungeon Finder tool, which, love it or hate it, changed WoW forever. You could argue that the only reason World of Warcraft has lasted 20 plus years is due to the continual efforts to improve accessibility. The Dungeon Finder opened up dungeons to everyone, not just those in a guild. And still to this day, it has kept queue times somewhat bearable, unless you queue really late at night like a really cool nocturnal person, and then good luck, you'll be waiting for hours. But overall, 3.3 wrapped up one of WoW's greatest expansions in a spectacular fashion, delivering goated gameplay and story, and will likely always be considered the gold standard in how to end an expansion. And that's it. That's the list. Of all the various patches in WoW's histories, these were the ones that most players to consider to be particularly memorable. But if you think we missed a patch, disagree with an order on this list, or have ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments.